The Story of Esther, a Purim Tale, retold by Eric A. Kimmel and illustrated by Jill Weber. It happened in the days of Ahasuerus, king of Persia, who ruled from India to the Ethiopian highlands. One night, the king held a banquet in his palace in the capital city of Shushan. The noble lords and ladies of Persia all attended except one. "Where's Vashti?" Ahasuerus asked. He sent a messenger with an order for the queen to come to the banquet at once. The messenger returned without her, saying, "The queen is ill. She refuses to come." "How dare she refuse the king's command?" Ahasuerus shouted. Vashti is unworthy to be queen. She will be queen no more." The king sent Vashti away in disgrace. Months passed. King Ahasuerus decided to marry again. He summoned all the maidens in the land of Persia to the city of Shushan. One would be chosen to become his queen. Now at this time there was a man named Mordechai living in the city of Shushan. He was a Hebrew, descended from those carried off as captives years ago when the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar burned the city of Jerusalem and destroyed the holy temple. Mordechai had a niece, Hadassah. The Persians called her Esther, the morning star, for in their eyes she was as beautiful as the Queen of Heaven. Mordechai brought Esther to the king's palace. She did not want to go. "What if the king commands me to do something against my religion?" she asked her uncle. "If that happens, you must refuse," Mordechai said. "However, it may not come to that. The Persians do not pray to idols. King Ahasuerus has always allowed us to worship in our own way. Do your best to serve him. If he asks about your people and your religion, tell the truth. But if he does not ask, there's no need to speak of it. Above all, do not be afraid. Trust God to protect you and to help you to find favor in the king's eyes." Esther entered the palace. Mordechai waited in the courtyard. He came there every day, asking those who passed through the gates about Esther and how she fared. One day, while sitting by the gate, he overheard two royal guards talking. They spoke openly, thinking that Mordechai, a Hebrew, would not know what they were saying. However, Mordechai understood Persian. He listened as the guards plotted to murder the king. Mordechai revealed the plot to the king's officers. The treacherous guards were arrested. The officers thanked Mordechai for saving the king's life. Meanwhile, inside the palace, the maidens prepared themselves to meet the king. Each strove to become the most beautiful. They bathed in milk and perfumed themselves with costly scents. They dressed in exquisite gowns and put on priceless jewelry. They darkened their eyelids with kohl and reddened their lips with cinnabar. Esther added but a touch of color to her face. Her only jewelry was a pair of gold earrings. She dressed in a simple gown of Egyptian linen, while the other maidens piled their hair into towering structures of netting and wires. Esther combed her hair and tied it with a cord of white wool. The other maidens laughed to see her dressed so simply, but King Ahasuerus did not laugh when Esther came before him. Esther's natural beauty outshone the others as the full moon outshines the stars and the planets. When the king spoke to her, she answered with such wit that he thought, "She is 1 in 10,000. I'm a fool if I do not make this girl my queen." King Ahasuerus announced his choice. Esther became his bride and took Vashti's place as queen of all Persia. Soon after these events, the king's chief minister, Haman, the son of Hamidata came riding toward the palace gate. His servants cried, "Bow down to Haman, bow to the living God." The people in the street rushed to throw themselves on the ground. Only one remained standing, Mordechai, Esther's uncle. Haman's guards tried to force him to his knees. Mordechai was stronger than they were. He threw them aside as if they were toys. "Why won't you bow down to me, the king's minister?" Haman asked. "I will gladly bow to you as the king's minister," Mordechai said, "but I will never bow to you as God. There is only one God who made heaven and earth. That God alone do I worship." Haman's anger flared. He vowed to take revenge on Mordechai, his family, and his entire people. That evening, Haman whispered to King Ahasuerus, "Are you aware that there are people living in your land who ignore your laws and insult your officials? They call themselves Hebrews, for it is said that their ancestors came from the other side of the great river. They cannot be trusted. It is best to get rid of them now, everyone, lest they rise up in a time of war and join your enemies." Haman wrote, "Do as you think best," King Ahasuerus said, handing Haman his signet ring engraved with the royal seal. Haman wrote out a proclamation and stamped it with the king's own seal. He sent copies to all the governors and officials in every corner of the land, telling them that on the 13th day of the 12th month, which is called Adar, every Hebrew within their walls, gates, and borders was to be killed. Neither the old nor the young was to be spared. The proclamation puzzled the people of Shushan. "Why does the king hate the Hebrews?" they wondered. "They have lived among us for years. They have harmed no one. They are our friends and neighbors." But a proclamation stamped with the king's seal was law. No one could question it. Mordechai tore his clothes. He poured ashes on his head. Dressed in rags, he went to sit by the palace gate. Esther's servants noticed him there and informed the queen. She came out to speak with her uncle. Mordechai read Haman's proclamation to her. "You must go to the king, beg him to spare the lives of our people." "I cannot," Esther said. "No one, not even the queen, may approach the king without permission. I cannot go unless he summons me. It is death to do so." Mordechai answered, "Do you think you will be safe in your palace while your people perish? I believe that God will save us. If not through you, then surely through someone else." "I will do what you ask," said Esther. "Have your people pray for me. I will go to the king, even if it means my death." And Esther, dressed in her finest robes, with the royal crown on her head, she went to stand silently at the entrance to the king's throne room. The king noticed Esther standing in the doorway. He smiled and pointed his scepter toward her, inviting her to enter. Esther bowed, then touched the scepter with her fingertips. "What may I do for my queen?" King Ahasuerus said. "Ask and you will receive, even if it were half my realm." "I desire only your happiness," Esther replied. "I know the cares of ruling are heavy. I have arranged a feast to gladden your heart. Please come to my chamber tomorrow night. Bring your minister, Haman, with you." Haman's pride swelled like never before. He boasted to his wife, "The queen has invited me to a private feast with the king. Next to King Ahasuerus, I'm the greatest in the land. Yet my joy turns bitter when I see that rascal Mordechai sitting by the palace gate." "Rid yourself of him," Haman's wife urged. "Build a gallows 100 feet high. When you dine with the king tonight, ask permission to hang Mordechai from it." "An excellent idea," said Haman. He ordered his servants to build the gallows. He looked forward to seeing his enemy Mordechai swinging high above the roofs of Shushan. That night, King Ahasuerus couldn't sleep. He summoned his scribe, to read to him from the royal chronicles. The scribes read how Mordechai the Hebrew warned the king of the guard's treachery. "This man saved my life," said Ahasuerus. "How was he rewarded?" "No reward was ever given," the scribes answered. "This cannot be," said the king. "A man who saves the king's life must be rewarded. Send for my minister Haman." When Haman arrived, King Ahasuerus asked him, "What should be done for the man whom the king wishes to honor?" Haman flushed with pride. He thought the king wanted to honor him. "Your Majesty," he began, "this man must be dressed in a royal robe with a royal crown on his head. He must be mounted on the finest horse in your stables. Your most important minister should lead him through the city, crying out so all may hear, 'Behold the man who the king wishes to honor.'" "Excellent!" King Ahasuerus exclaimed. "Do this for Mordechai, the man who sits at the palace gates. You yourself shall lead him." So Mordechai was dressed in a royal robe. A golden crown was placed upon his head. He was mounted on a white horse from the royal stables. Haman, the king's minister, led him through the streets of Shushan, crying out, "Behold the man whom the king wishes to honor." Haman's hatred for Mordechai and the people knew no bounds. At the same time, when the people of Shushan saw Mordechai raised up and Haman brought low, they began to wonder if Haman might be less powerful than he claimed. Haman and King Ahasuerus attended Esther's banquet the following night. Haman practiced the words he meant to say, and when the king was merriest, he intended to ask permission to hang Mordechai. But as he started to speak, King Ahasuerus turned to Esther. "My beloved queen," he began, "thank you for this fine feast. I have never enjoyed myself as I have tonight. Let me grant you a gift. Ask for whatever you desire." And Esther threw herself at the king's feet, trembling. She grasped his hand and begged, "My lord, my husband, spare my life. Spare the lives of my uncle Mordechai and my people. Do not allow our enemies to destroy us." "What threatens, my beloved queen? Who would kill my loyal friend Mordechai?" King Ahasuerus shouted. Esther pointed to Haman. "That man, Haman, your minister." She thrust a copy of Haman's proclamation into his hands. King Ahasuerus read it with growing rage. "How dare you?" he shrieked at Haman. "This proclamation is forgery. You misuse the power I gave you." In terror, Haman clasped Esther's feet. "Oh, queen, I have mercy. Spare my life." King Ahasuerus kicked him away. "How dare you touch the queen? Away with this wretch. Hang him from that gallows out there. Hang his whole family with him." And so the end that Haman prepared for Mordechai became his own. King Ahasuerus canceled Haman's proclamation, decreeing instead that Mordechai and his people should be honored and protected. Furthermore, from that time forth, the 13th day of Adar would be a celebration for the Hebrews and their neighbors as well. So it is to this day, the 13th day of Adar is a time of joy and merriment. And because Haman threw dice to choose the day of destruction, the holiday is named after the Persian word for dice, pul. That is why we call it Purim. The end.